So many device choices, so little time. Do you go off the shelf? Do you do custom built? We're going to explore that now. Hi, I'm Keith Sott, VP of Innovation and Solutions at Esper, and you're watching Fleet Geek. Build your dedicated device fleet your way. Hi, Keith Sott, VP of Innovation and Solutions at Esper. And in today's video, we're going to do a tour of the different categories of dedicated devices and the considerations of if you are entering the dedicated device fleet space, how you should look at these different types of dedicated devices that you can either buy or commission or create yourself, and kind of how you should think about it at a top level to help guide you to make the right decision for your use case and your business. With that, let's go. In order to figure out what the right path is for you, it's helpful to have a segmentation or a model to organize the device types to be able to work with. It's important to point out that this really is a continuum. They're not hard and fast, and these attributes can shift around between these different categories of devices, but it's a great way to be able to look at it and understand the top level considerations and trade-offs as you do that journey for what kind of dedicated device you need. So it starts with commercial off the shelf. And this is kind of the obvious one where you're going to have your consumer tablets and your consumer smartphones, but it also encompasses devices built for specific vertical markets. And there's a lot of advantages to this type of device that we'll get into, and it's really useful to serve as you build out your dedicated device fleet, including your strategy. But that also leads to what I call customizable devices. And this is a little different in that many of these commercial off-the-shelf devices have the ability to tweak and tune them in various ways so that you can dial them in for a particular use case. And so a good example is a very simple one. You could take a commercial off-the-shelf tablet and put a case around it. That's a very simple way to do it, to adapt a commercial off-the-shelf device for a particular vertical market use case. But sometimes it's designed into the product itself. So it would be things like programmable buttons that you see on some devices. It could be hidden software that allows you to change the behavior of the OS that isn't made generally available to consumers. But it does let you leverage off the shelf to do some customization that may be appropriate for your use case. The next one is a little bit more intense, which is a custom built device. And so when you talk about a custom built device, really what you're doing is you're taking like a common compute platform. So a good example would be something like a dev board like this. This is a Pumpkin dev board, i500, created by Logic, that is done with MediaTek. And so think of this as like the core that you can use, so you don't have to design the compute, but essentially what you're doing is you're taking it and turning it into a device that's wrapped to your specification. So it is more intense work, and I'll give you this kind of extreme example here, which is used for smart fitness devices. You can see it's kind of a completed product, but it's really designed to fit into a particular mount or casing that's associated with the fitness product, but it's a pretty well baked out design and ready to go. Now again, it goes back to the continuum thing, that you could go with something fairly finished that you then detail around, or you can go more from the start of a dev board and build it all up yourself. The last one is custom design. And this is the most intense, because literally you are taking on the responsibility to drive the design of the product. You typically see this with higher volume products that justify the engineering cost created to do the design, or higher price products that have a lower per unit volume, or a lower volume, but per unit it makes sense to put in the custom design work, which is called NRE, non-recoverable engineering. So typically when you do that, you get a reference design from a semiconductor vendor, right? And you do that to then create the electrical design, the industrial design, the mechanical design that's associated with the product that you're trying to build. I think a good example of that is the Seattle SD7. They needed to do a custom design. They're breaking new ground on the market using Android. And so that means they literally took on all the requirements, all the design, and working with their manufacturing partner in Asia to get this particular device created. So that gives you a flavor of the different categories. So let's dive into a bit around the considerations. So when you look at commercial off the shelf, it's great because this typically has the lowest price per unit, right? You're dealing with consumer volumes. You don't have to worry about inventory as much, procuring components, any of that, but you are beholden to the overall cycle of the industry. As you may be aware, we have some component challenges that affect everything, but the big OEMs typically have a better ability to obtain components to be able to build and ship their product than perhaps if you're going custom built or custom design and you're completely on your own in that particular situation. And so this is very nice because it's taken care of for you as well as service and support. It's typically backed by an OEM and you know what to expect, you know how to work, and it's not on you. So it kind of goes back to, if you can pull it off with a commercial off-the-shelf device, it could be good, but you also have to think about considerations of things like, how is that OS maintained? Because typically what you see for the consumer devices is it's driven by the consumer market, and providing security patches may be inadequate for your use case. Now there is a branch here where there are these vertical market devices from many vertical market OEMs that build specialized devices for POS, inventory, and what they tend to do is map both the design requirements, the ruggedness requirements, and how they maintain the software to the particular needs of the vertical market. The trade-off is that these devices tend to have a premium price compared to the consumer off-the-shelf devices. And so when our customers crush the numbers, sometimes it swings to a vertical market device. Sometimes they go for a consumer device and just roll with the cost savings because that trade-off is acceptable to them. And then you jump over to customizable. So for this one, it is a little slower compared to commercial off the shelf. Literally for this, you're just taking and going to roll it out for your dedicated device solution. For this, there's a little bit of what I would call integration work, because essentially what you're doing is through that light customization, you're going to have to do things like decide what case you want to get. You're going to have to buy it. You're going to have to assemble it with the particular tablet. So if there are physical aspects associated with the device that you're trying to change, you have to figure out how to do it and operationalize it. If you're working at the software level, well then you need to make those software modifications, whether it's calling a set of APIs, programming how a button would work from your application. That would be an additional set of like software requirements that you need to make sure that you execute on and track as the vendor changes how they do it from the commercial off-the-shelf source, if you will. And what I mean by that is like these vendors keep on moving their technology forward, and it's usually tied to a device model. So if you have an older model and they come out with a new one, they may have a set of new APIs, deprecate old APIs that you're going to have to deal with. And so that's additional overhead for you. But it's very nice because you get the advantages of off the shelf, and if you can get the appropriate level of customization off of it, that may serve what you're trying to do. Now, when you go to custom built, if you do it right, the nice thing about this is you can leverage designs, right? Because that's what this is all about. As you can see with this particular device right here, it is a baseline tablet engine, if you will, compute, and really what you're doing is you're customizing the wrapping around it and specifying the display, and from that you can get a fairly tuned device for your particular use case, but you're not burning all that NRE that you have to do for custom built. So you kind of get the best of both worlds, but that also means that you're responsible for working with the device maker around inventory, pricing, and also, importantly, the OS load. Because what the device makers typically do is they have a base OS image. They maintain it across all the different permutations of the device that they build off their base hardware package, off their base OS, and you're beholden to them in terms of how they build and maintain that, including over-the-air updates. So typically what you see are the device makers wanting to own that. Now, all of this, part of what Esper does is from the OS level, we help out here. Our platform helps smooth out dealing with OTA, and in fact, we can actually do it for you if we have foundation support, which is our OS. for that particular piece of hardware. So there are things that we can do at Esper to smooth out this entire journey, including custom built. But then you go to custom design. So this comes into play typically if you're breaking new ground in the industry, which is like the Seata SD7. So if that's the case and you have the business model to support it, this may make the most sense for you, but this also has the longest timeline. You know, you think about cellular as an example. If you get a commercial off-the-shelf device with cellular support, they've already covered operator certification and all the regulatory body requirements so that you can actually use the wireless in the device in the particular market that you want to deliver it to. This crosses over to customizable as well. It gets harder once you go to custom built. Sometimes the device makers have done this for the core wireless module, sometimes they haven't. When you get to custom design, it's completely on you to do that. So you have to think about your deployment environments, deployment locations when you do custom design, because that's going to be the most expensive and the most intense for you to be able to do. So this is a quick view of the different buckets. Again, kind of keeping it top level and simple. It is a continuum, there is crossover, and now we're going to jump into how do you think about this for making this decision of entering into what category device you want to pursue for your dedicated device fleet. So what are the considerations that you should look at as you go through this process of making your decision? A big one is use case, right? What are you trying to deliver as an experience, as a business process, as a monetization point with these dedicated devices? And so by defining your use case and requirements, that will give you a clear indication of what path that you want to take. If your requirements are such a commercial off-the-shelf device will suffice and you're willing to accept the operational trade-offs, if you will, dealing with OS releases, the lifespan of the product in the market being driven by consumer. On the other side, from a vertical market perspective, the premium that you're going to have to pay to get those devices, but if it delivers on what you need from a requirements and use case perspective, that may be a better path for you to go because it takes a lot of overhead off the table for you. You don't have to deal with inventory, you don't have to deal with product builds, you don't have to deal with certification. It's all taken care of for you by the OEM. So that's very important, and if you can get some level of customization that lets you tune for your particular use case, that may be the best way for you to go. But in other cases, it doesn't make any sense. So I think when you look at the consumer fitness market, that one is a tough one to do off the shelf because essentially you are integrating into your overall solution, your overall offering, a piece of compute equipment. And so that's where custom built can come into play because that lets you do the mods off of a particular hardware base with the OS to be able to create the type of product that you wish to create. Then it becomes a consideration of to what degree do you want to control that experience. Like we work with some consumer fitness companies that literally from the OS level want to control the whole thing, and that's where they turn to us to use Esper Foundations for Android to be able to get that degree of customization at the OS level. And then finally, if you're doing that new use case, breaking new ground, you're probably not going to find anything out there that does it for you. If your business model justifies it and you can do the engineering spend to be able to accomplish that, noting that you can outsource aspects of that like industrial design, mechanical design, things like that, then custom design probably is the best route for you to go. But this also goes to, well, what are your economics around it? You know, what is your per unit price point? What are you trying to achieve? And then how much NRE are you willing to spend? So you got to know that because this will help potentially disqualify some options. If you have to be low NRE, but you're willing to accept a high per unit price, this probably won't work for custom design, but it could work for custom built. So a very important part is to establish the economics around it. And then what is your life cycle for the device? How long does it need to be in the market? Are you okay with a short duration of your device? Will it probably be broken quickly? Do you have a deployment that you expect to churn quickly as you iterate on your business model and your user experience? In that case, that may fit well with off the shelf because these consumer products typically churn quickly. Conversely, interestingly enough, from off-the-shelf for vertical markets, you can get very long life products. So you have to decide what is your lifespan, your life cycle. And the other part, going back to what I was using in the fitness case, is like OS. What do you need to get out of it? And will the standard offering, if you will, give you what you need? Or do you need to operate at the OS level to make modifications to get to the use case that you're trying to deliver on? The other is service and support. How do you want to handle that? Do you want service and support to be something that's outsourced to your device maker vendor? Arguably, the bigger OEMs that do consumer products have very sophisticated models for break fix, returns, allowances, credit, all those types of things that you could achieve if you go off the shelf. At the other end of the extreme, if you're doing custom design, you are paying for it all, it's yours, and you better make sure that your spend, your burn is on target, because otherwise it's wasted and it's money down the drain. And then, what are the engineering capabilities within your organization? Do you need to build them? Do you already have them? I mean, we've seen some end customers that have Android operating system build teams on staff. They're super sophisticated, you know, they deal with Linux, they deal with Android, and for them, doing something like this is not a big deal. But at the other end, we have some customers that are more about the kind of the business scheme that they're driving, and that means that they're kind of light on engineering, but very heavy on understanding the market, understanding their customers and the end customers of their customers. And for that, it doesn't make a lot of sense to take a path that requires a lot of engineering competency, because they just don't have it, and it doesn't make sense for them to spend on that. So this is a very important part that you have to look at when you decide what type of device that you're going to do. And then, how quickly do you need to get to market? If you need to get to market quick, commercial off the shelf is the way to go, right? So what's your speed to market here? If you have a longer timeline and it fits into kind of the innovation that you're trying to achieve, at the other end, the custom design, it's going to take the longest, but it's going to allow you to execute on exactly what you need to execute on to win the market. Now, the interesting thing here is like, all right, we talk about this kind of atomically that you have to decide, but it's possible for you to take a staged approach to this. So this is a very common model. Let's say you don't know exactly what your use case needs to be, but you need to get out there and start to engage with prospects, customers, the customers of the customers to figure it out. And so with that, if you can adapt a commercial off-the-shelf device to start to get going out quickly, you can start to do the mods to the off-the-shelf for some customization, right? But you're still leveraging off-the-shelf. As you figure it out, you can take the step into custom built, because you have gotten information that you're making good design decisions off of grabbing something that's off the shelf. You typically don't see this for the custom design, right? It's kind of unusual to progress to custom design, because in that case, you'll typically stop here, you'll be happy, because custom design tends to be its own entry point. But I would contend that it is appropriate to use some of these other device categories to get information from prospects, customers, partners, as you figure out what your custom design could be. And more importantly, essentially, you're getting market telemetry by, you don't even need to do it yourself, but what do, in a sense, your competitors do, because you are an OEM in this case, around the available options so that you can figure out what design you build to get it right. Because again, you are paying for it, and if you're paying for it, you want to make sure you're on target for what you're trying to achieve. All right, the recap. So you have off-the-shelf available devices. From that, some of them have the ability to do some customization around the device, whether it's casing or buttons or APIs within the OS itself to make the device behave differently. That is available to you. You have custom built that's usually done off of some base design board that is provided from semiconductor vendors that give you more flexibility to get exactly the device you want without you having to do the engineering expenditure around the base design. You basically leverage a common design to tune it for what your particular use case is. And then finally, the custom design, where you need to design the whole thing yourself. So it is a continuum. You can take a journey through this if you wish. And if you are trying to figure this out, this is what we do at Esper. This is specifically what my team does to help partners, customers, and prospects go through this journey. So we're happy to engage with you and see what we can do to get you the right dedicated device that you're trying to build for your use case and your business. Thank you.